And even on those very, very modest assumptions, you still have savings of very considerable, of hundreds of millions of pounds. And we need to have those kinds of fairly hard-nosed, these are simple, but nevertheless hard-nosed arguments. But of course, that excludes all the other kinds of costs that don't appear in those figures. It excludes the impact on communities, the impact on victims, and the impact on the other families, the rest of the families involved. I just thought I would introduce this. I came across it. I'm not a professional crime researcher, but this was God, I've forgotten what UJD stands for. John, do you know what it stands for? It's Universal Juvenile Delinquency Study. Anyway, it was a famous study in the States of delinquents born in those years and followed right the way through. So a tremendous longitudinal study that tracked these people. And why I thought this was interesting is because of shows the difference in the routes followed by these different people, but also because in the inquiry we cite the GI Bill. How many, does people here know about the GI Bill? Probably one of the biggest adult education initiatives ever. After the Second World War, all US veterans were given an entitlement to return to learning. Fantastically bold initiative taken up by hundreds of thousands of veterans as a way of reintegrating them into society. And I may say, contrast that with the very sad situation that we see of so many veterans returning from Afghanistan and other wars. Now, these were delinquents, and these were their reintegration into society. So they'd never been into military service, only got 15%. Being in military service slightly improved their chances. If they were in military service and took advantage of the GI training, then over half of these initial delinquents actually ended up in good, skilled or professional jobs. And I thought the last figure is particularly interesting. I'm not quite sure how you explain it, but if they went in early on and took advantage of GI training, almost 4 in 5 actually ended up in good jobs. And I think it's really important to show these kinds of impacts. But as I say, it's partly, I was delighted to come across this because we think more generally in the inquiry that an entitlement to learning of the kind that the GI Bill had is really significant. So let me just turn, makes the transition, to 3 of our particular recommendations. I think Merrin's going to pick up some of the points in the crime paper. These are general ones from our report. First of all, the need to have much more integration in the local services provided. And those seem to me the 4 key ones. I think we're at a time now when this is actually becoming more realistic. On Monday, some of us were at a conference, and Steve Bullock, the mayor of Lewisham, was talking a little bit about the experience of Total Place, the initiative to try and, where there have been 13 pilots around the country aiming to bring together services to make them more effective. And he was talking about how they'd had a look at the enormous expenditure. I was amazed, actually. Even in Lewisham, which is not a huge area, I think he said 140 million pounds is spent on safeguarding types of activities. And they realized that only 7 million of that was spent on preventive. The rest was all on make and mend type ones. But I think that the Total Place initiative, I'm sure that the current government will rename it or do things with it, but it's showing signs, I think, of generating some real impetus on the integration of services. And I think that's very much in line with what we recommended as part of the service. Secondly, we propose a general entitlement which already exists in some respects for basic skills. And I don't really need to enlarge on that, except to say that we want that built on to raise the overall levels for the population as a whole. And we have some ideas in the report about how that might be taken forward. But the third, the specific recommendation in respect of offenders, we suggest that there might be a number of what we call transition entitlements, where people are making a difficult transition in life, often going from an institution into society. So from care or from a residential situation out into the wider world. And so we make that recommendation in respect of the offender population. Now, politically, I recognize that this is a difficult one to sell, as indeed probably quite a lot of the things to do with offender learning are. I'm quite sure what the Daily Mail would make if, once they got hold of the notion that ex-prisoners would be entitled to a place on an education or training course. Well, I say I can't imagine. Actually, I can perfectly well imagine what they'd make of it. And that's why the type of calculations and the rationale that I was putting up in the previous slide or two are so important, to try and get a degree of greater rationality and common sense into the debate. And the suggestion that someone leaving prison, maybe it's not every offender who's leaving, maybe it's only those who've been in for 12 months or more than 4 years. I think it's 23,000 have been in for 12 months to 4 years, and another 25,000 for 4 years or longer, i.e. those who are likely to have most difficulty in reintegrating into society. Something that guarantees them a place in either a training course or education. Why? Because it'll give them a purpose, because it'll give them the access to a different set or milieu or set of companions. That's the social capital. It'll switch them from the, if you like, the negative social capital, their tendency to go back and associate with friends and acquaintances, which will take them back into prison, give them a different set, a different context, and to give them the learning, the skills, the confidence, all those other things that education brings. So I think it's a wholly realistic type of proposal to make, in spite of the political difficulties of selling it. And I do just think that the climate might have changed enough to allow a recommendation like that to be taken seriously. Let me say a little bit about one of our other of our proposals, the citizens' curriculum. This is not, we're not suggesting a uniform national citizens' curriculum for adults as we've had in the schools. This is a framework, an outline. We just suggest 4 different types of capabilities that there's some fancy, so let me go through all this in a pointless way. So, and these are the 4 that we've picked up: financial, health, digital, and civic, to suggest that wherever you are in the country, there should be some offer that it gives you access to these kinds of capabilities at different levels. And I think they all apply to the offender population. Financial capability, again, it sounds a very instrumental type of learning. But actually, if, as we believe, learning is a key to giving people control over their own lives, then learning to manage their finances, which can be chaotic if you've got no money. They can also be pretty chaotic if you've got quite a lot of money, and learning how to deal with that is really significant. Health, well, the figures I showed earlier, you don't need me to tell you about the health issues that confront offenders. It's not only managing your own health, it's actually contributing to creating a healthier environment around you. Digital, some wonderful initiatives in prisons which help prisoners improve their digital capabilities, and that has to be a positive way forward.